the question of the pets being eaten in Ohio, very believable. I saw some body cam footage from an officer that certainly seemed to suggest it, but there's now doubt that that's a real story. I don't know how much truth there is in any of this, but it was an interesting story. If it turns out that there's no merit to the story, then it clearly reads as a trap, an irresistible internet lure. But anyway, traps abound. I don't think we necessarily spot all of them, but if you were going to disrupt an enemy that was learning to think about your behind the scenes regime maintenance or regime disruption, you would figure out how to get them to trip over things like this.
Folks, Brett Weinstein has it all figured out. Left Reckoning 186. Hello, David.
Hey, Matt. An irresistible internet lure.
That's one way to describe it. Now,
is he talking about the Haitian thing?
Yeah, the Haitian eating dogs. That's irresistible for some reason.
Irresistible to you, Bubba.
He said it was a very interesting story if true. My question is, why do you come to that assessment? Because a little piece of advice, and look, I don't want to help these guys as they're trying to disrupt the regime that I'm clearly a part of, but I would just say maybe ask, like, is this relevant that a black guy is walking around with a goose to the national political debate? Even if it is, which it wasn't. It was actually a guy from the Fish and Game Department clearing roadkill. But even if it was, that's actually what it was. Because I think some people have a tough time understand that black people could work for the Fish and Game Department. But even if it was a Haitian migrant on temporary protected status, harvesting a live goose from a park and taking it, ask yourself, why is this politics? Why is this on the docket today? There's quite a lot going on in the world, and we're talking about a goose being harvested and some grainy body cam footage of black people over a grill, and people are saying it's a cat.
I'll tell you.
Yeah.
No, I was just saying, not to be too glib, but part of this story, particularly some of those grill shots that people are freaking out about, was a real reminder of why, we need more people to become grill pilled in this country. Because for a lot of folks, seeing meat that hasn't been mashed and minced and ground is very disturbing.
To a paste. Yeah, that looks like a carcass of some sort on the grill. It's like,
no, friends, it's time to attend nice carne asada or something. Go outside, please. Well, folks, we got a lot to get to, including education, where Matt and I are going to get schooled by some of the really, really brilliant minds at PragerU. And in just a couple minutes, we will be joined by the Letterhack and our good friend Harvey Kaye to talk about the Economic Bill of Rights. But before we get there, Matt, I got to do a little quick zoom in on an election that happened right here in Austin, Texas. One that we covered. And, anyone who's been watching this program, anyone who knows me knows, I've been sort of dealing with a lot of pain regarding my hometown, as a lot of the most unhinged psychopaths from all over the globe have decided to make Austin, Texas, their focal point for their deranged politics. Most recently, in our primary elections, there was a laser focus on Jose Garza, who is somebody who does a lot of work in the community, standing up for everyday people, trying to change our justice system, and somebody who maintains a good amount of popularity. Now, that was a big problem, particularly for a lot of our newer residents who moved to Austin because they thought they were going to be entering into some, Wild West movie. And Jose Garza faced a very, very well-funded challenger in the Democratic primary for district attorney Jeremy Silstein. And now this is a figure who just, for people who don't understand, Jose Garza is a progressive district attorney. We can talk about whether or not that's the right strategy for the movement to be going to or whatever another time. There's a progressive district attorney, like many other places, is doing things like reducing, is not pursuing some of the most egregious excesses of the American carceral state. Big problem for certain folks. And you had people like Barry Weiss, famous Texan and famous Austinite, tweeting about how people should be voting against Garza. You also had Elon Musk making out these kind of tweets as well. Go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say Barry Weiss, of course, the headmistress of the University of Texas, Austin, Dallas campus.
That's too many words there. I'm not even going to get a seat. The University of Austin is not in Austin. You are right. It is in Dallas, but it is not the University of Texas, which is a very different thing. No, I mean, so anyways, all this kind of freak out. We covered this when it happened, and I joked I was very happy to live in a town where Willie Nelson's endorsement for Jose Garza meant way more than Elon Musk's, because Jose Garza defeated his primary challenger by about 66% to 33%. Just completely walloped him, despite the fact that insane amounts of money were being dumped into this campaign. And a lot of those things created very, very odd mailers and ads again in a DA race, which is kind of wild if you know anything about politics, including this ad right here, Matt, which I don't know how well you can read it, but it's a very frightening photograph of Jose Garza, a teddy bear covered in blood. And the reader says, Jose Garza is filling Austin's streets with pedophiles and killers. As false and dirty of an accusation as you can make. Tell Jose Garza's outrageous plea deals are doing nothing to stop that. When will you stop cutting deals with these monsters? Again, Austin is actually a city that has gotten much safer in the past few years. All of these kind of freakouts aren't based in data, just kind of vibes and freakouts of people who stay in their communities. In fact, it was very interesting. The funding that came for Jose Garza's opponent pretty much came from the nice, wealthy, gated communities in West Austin. Big surprise there. But anyways, absolutely insane ad. And a lot of people
it wasn't working class whites that had a printing press put together and decided to spread some hate.
Good old boys, getting some info out there. No, it was rich people who are getting mad. But anyways, that ad came out, and it was very odd because it came from this group called Saving Austin. Saving Austin, Matt, much like the University of Austin, isn't actually based out of Austin. It was based out of Irving, Texas. But because it was a new organization, nobody knew who was behind it until now. Elon Musk secretly funded bid to dump Democratic prosecutor. The billionaire's real target may have been the man he is increasingly conspiratorial worldview has compared to the supervillain Magneto, George Soros. And this is a report. I would use a local news source here, like KView or something like that, but you can't use those websites without your computer lighting on fire from all the fucking ads. So, sorry. But this is a report that came out from the Wall Street Journal that found that Musk dropped hundreds of thousands of dollars to fund this PAC to unseat a district attorney who, again, won the vote against an extremely well-funded opponent, 66% to nearly 33%.
Probably because he loves free speech so much that he wanted to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars non-transparently.
I mean, and I'll tell you, it's only going to get worse, I think, for a lot of people here because, Musk, as people may know, has been having to attend family court because he has been trying to keep his children away from their mother, Grimes. People maybe remember that story from a few months ago now, right? Where Grimes' mother was pleading publicly with Elon Musk to please let their children go and visit their dying grandmother, or I guess great grandmother. Really, really kind of despicable guy who thinks that the rules and the laws don't apply to him, and certainly thinks that he can buy our democracy. Saving Austin has now changed its name to Saving Texas, which is pretty rich. Again, that this guy has moved here, and like a lot of Californians, is bringing all of their California baggage to to Austin, Texas. Particularly his delusional belief that being a rich billionaire means that you should be in charge of everything. And again, very happy the voters of Austin rejected that, and hopefully, we have more opportunities to shut that thing down in the future.
Yeah, I mean, not only like his nasty to his actual family, but also abusive to people that he works for. I mean, numerous allegations. I believe he tried to get out of one by offering the woman a horse if she's kept things quiet, which is, you know, something like you'd see on an HBO show. But I guess that's Elon Musk for you.
Well, have you seen his fights now with the FAA? He's trying
No,
to. No, it's just like the federal government, who has been very, very generous to Elon Musk and giving him plenty of contracts.
a third of $1 billion. New President Barack Obama gave him during the financial crisis to keep Tesla alive. So thank you very much, Elon.
Thank you, and thank you, Barry. you know,
Yep.
looking out for the little guy there. Well, talking about the little guy and how they deserve much, much more. Very thrilled to be bringing on our guests this evening. You know him, you love him, you've read all of his great books, and now you have an opportunity to see more of his work in comic strip form. Our good friend Harvey Kaye, how are you doing?
It's great to see you guys. Needless to say, it really is great to see you guys. I'm glad you said not only, in quotes, thank you, Elon Musk, but thank you, Barry.
I also got to bring on the Matt. You may know him as the Letterhack, a really great illustrator and friend of the program. How you doing, friend?
Howdy. How are you guys? I'm well.
Stoked to
Doing
have you
good,
on.
Matt?
Yeah, thanks.
Well, let's.
Hi, Harvey. How's it going?
Good to see you, Matt. What has it been, like 5 days, maybe?
Something like that. Yeah.
Well,
by the way, we're about to go back into working together, so it's going to be. He's going to get tired of seeing me.
well, you
Ooh,
gotta,
a teaser.
we gotta get through what y'all just worked on first. Let me pull this up for everybody. There's a link below in the show notes. You can find this on Common Dreams, A New Economic Bill of Rights for the 21st Century by Harvey J. Kaye and the Letterhack. So maybe to get us started, I want to talk about the politics and the idea of Economic Bill of Rights in just a second. But why don't y'all tell us about what this project is and what the idea behind it was?
Matt,
Harvey?
or me? Okay.
Yeah.
So for several years, actually a lot of years, you guys may remember the For Freedom stuff that I did with Michael and with Sam online, that kind of stuff. Well, at the heart of all of that as well is this idea of Americans struggling for and pursuing an economic bill of rights, the idea of which is rooted in the 1930s and 1940s, along with the idea of the four freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. The idea of the Economic Bill of Rights was always really on FDR's mind from when he ran in 1932 right through his presidency. But in 1943, he asked the folks in the White House to commission a series of polls, surveys of the American people, to ask them, what is it they want after the war? What would be good to pursue? And the answers, he wasn't surprised, and I don't think Americans themselves would have been terribly surprised. But even today, when I mention this, people are surprised. About 85% of Americans wanted such things as guaranteed health care, comfortable housing, guaranteed education, guaranteed job. I mean, it was what would really go into making a good society. So in what they call this State of the Union, that's the word, State of the Union message of January 44. This is at the end of, obviously, that's the very beginning of the new year. This is in light of the results of those surveys and polls. FDR delivered a State of the Union message, I should say, in which he actually called for an economic Bill of Rights. The fundamentals, as I just said, healthcare and housing and a guaranteed job and education. And there were other things as well, including recreation, including a right to recreation. So it really was impactful when he did so. The labor movement, both the AFL and the CIO, the unions, and by the way, the federations were separate at the time. One, the trades unions, the other, the industrial unions, and they were not associated. But both federations launched national campaigns in pursuit of or in support of that call for an economic Bill of Rights. The CIO in particular went all out for it, all out. And they actually created their own call for it by calling it the People's Program of 1944. Now, on his passing in 1945, that very spring, a year later, and he had campaigned on it, and Americans wanted this, believe me. On his passing, Truman actually did try to pursue that idea. The Republicans, however, had won the 1946 congressional elections. And as a consequence, not only did the Economic Bill of Rights get shunted aside, but so too did the Taft-Hartley Act get passed, which is, of course, the first of the major efforts on the part of Republicans to disempower labor, okay? But the idea really never died despite FDR's absence. So throughout the 50s, when Americans were asked about such things as healthcare, never were there fewer than 50% of Americans who wanted guaranteed healthcare for all. The more important fact is that in 1960, the Democratic Party presented a platform to the nation that was not just modeled after, but actually referred to the Economic Bill of Rights as the source for their party platform in 60. The only concern they had, at least the leaders, the authors of the document had, was whether or not Kennedy would actually support it. Could he live with that? And ultimately, I have a feeling he said he could, because he wanted to make sure Eleanor Roosevelt gave him the nod for his campaign. Well, then in 1965, I mean, we've got in 63, the assassination. In 64 and 65, you've got Lyndon Johnson, who is proposing the Great Society initiatives and the war on poverty. And of course, the agenda of legislation during those early to mid 60s years, that are, and all of which was enacted, and FDR signed on to, and LBJ signed on to them, was truly amazing. I mean, it was civil rights, voting rights, Medicare, Medicaid, a whole host of environmental regulations, educational initiatives. I mean, it was as if the New Deal had returned, except for one key thing. And this I think was LBJ's fault. He did not secure an end to the Taft-Hartley Act, which he had promised the labor movement he would do. But in any case, in 65, A. Philip Randolph, the great Black labor and civil rights leader, issued or proposed a freedom budget for all Americans. And this is, in essence, modeled after the idea of the four freedoms, freedom from want, but also based on the kinds of things, the context include the kinds of things that FDR had called for an economic Bill of Rights. And then in 1968, not long before his assassination, as part of his effort to launch a poor people's movement, Martin Luther King Jr. wrote an article for, I guess it was Look magazine, and very directly called for an economic Bill of Rights. Now, I could lay out a whole history of how FDR directly influenced Randolph and Randolph directly influenced MLK. Just, you'll have to believe me, okay? Now, undeniably, for many years thereafter, we didn't hear very much of the idea. It didn't mean Americans didn't want it. In fact, in spite of the so-called conservatism of the American voter in the 70s and thereafter, polling showed that Americans still wanted it. But nevertheless, it was not until Bernie Sanders in 2016 raised the question again, and in 2020 actually placed a call for such a Bill of Rights on his website. He spoke of it publicly a couple of times, maybe a few. I'm only aware of 2 times in particular. The tragedy was he didn't really make it the heart of his campaign. Okay. Nevertheless, the idea, again, was now back on the agenda, so to speak. And Elizabeth Warren made reference to it. Thereafter, we know that in 2020, Biden won. There were efforts in those task forces that were created, the Biden-Sanders task forces. There were efforts, and I know this because I was advising the efforts, to get the Economic Bill of Rights into the package of things to go into the platform that year. That did not happen. That did not happen. But then this past few years, Nina Turner saw the Gravel video that I did on FDR's speech and the idea of an Economic Bill of Rights. And she made her second campaign, or built her second campaign around the idea of an Economic Bill of Rights. And frankly, I'm pretty sure that the billionaires who went after her and blocked her campaign, or essentially supported, what's her name? I forgot the name of the woman who
I
beat her.
blocked it out.
Yeah, me too, actually. I apologize. I'm pretty sure the billionaires didn't want to hear about an Economic Bill of Rights. Having said that, Marianne Williamson this past year made it really, again, the centerpiece of her campaign. Unfortunately, for all the efforts that I've tried to make, and hopefully this is revived with this comic that Matt and I have done, that maybe some of the folks in the so-called conservative, the congressional, what do they call it? The Progressive Caucus, the Congressional Progressive Caucus, something like that. Hopefully one or more of them will start to pick it up. There has been interest, however, across the board. Sarah Nelson has been interested in it. I've done a couple of things with her, and she does refer now to FDR's speech in her own key speeches. I mean, the point is that this is something that came up in the course of the New Deal and the war years. FDR proposed it, and for all those many years, the idea never really died. And what we do know today is that polling shows, and we actually secured a poll, shows that Americans still want what would go into an Economic Bill of Rights. Having said that, I'm going to segue a bit and bring Matt into the question. Matt contacted me, not Matt Lech, who I've known for a long time, obviously, but Matt Strackbein, my co-author on this, co-producer, and said, would I be interested in coming on his show? And you can explain to people, Matt, how you operate that show. It's possible everyone here knows already, but you might tell them, and then we could take it from there.
Yeah, I'm basic interview show. I bring on a lot of online left-wing media figures. Dave, you've been on there. As I always do, I never miss the opportunity to recommend that, when somebody's talking to me about something they're very passionate about, I say that should be a comic. And Harvey came on. He was talking about this new Economic Bill of Rights for the 21st century that he and Alan Minsky composed and made a piece for Common Dreams. And I said, we always go back and forth on who actually said it. I believe I said it should be a comic, and then started. Harvey and I became friends.
Yeah, immediately. By the way.
After that, we were talking. I mean, it's easy to do. He's like the nicest guy in the world.
No, you're the nicest guy. I'm just the nicest. Maybe
there we go.
Okay, well, we get along very well. This has truly been the best collaboration I've ever had making comics, and I've had my fair share. But we became friends, and we were having phone calls, and we were just kind of getting to know each other, catching up on stuff. And I kept bringing up that, I really want to make a comic. I really want to do something with you. You've got all this writing. It should be illustrated. We should, it would make it that much more accessible and be a lot quicker in writing another book. So let's take something you've done and make a comic out of it. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm known for making comics anyway. So, I have plenty of energy for that. Right. This is my wheelhouse. So I would send Harvey illustrations of him and Thomas Paine. I would send him little comics. I would send him time-lapse videos of those drawings so he could see the various stages.
Let me just say, because as soon as he mentioned that possibility, the idea did actually click a little bit in my head. Two very good friends of mine, one very good friend, another guy I've known for a long time, have both taken their historical scholarship into graphic novels. Paul Buell, nobody has produced more left graphic novels perhaps than Paul, along with,
a lot.
Artists. And the other fellow is Marcus Rediker, who's done some really great work around seamen and slavery and things like that. So I was already intrigued, and I liked comics growing up. I liked them quite a bit. So when he mentioned it, I didn't jump and say yes, but it definitely intrigued me a lot. And the more I saw of what Matt was capable of doing, the more I thought I'd be an idiot not to
It's
take him up on it.
it's I realized you can't just convince somebody, no, it'll be easy. Don't worry. Trust me. Like who am I to Harvey? He doesn't know. So I went about trying to convince him. And in our discussions, I said he said, well, what would like help me figure out like how would the comic be? And of course, I didn't want to just illustrate one of Harvey's books because that's sort of redundant, right? So I used one of our literal conversations in the comic. And that's when it sort of clicked. Harvey accidentally referred to a comic book panel as a cell, which is an animation term. And I said panel, right, to correct him. And I just illustrated that. And he was like, I totally get it. This is going to be awesome. Because now my character in the comic, Harvey insisted I be in there. And I said, hey, every hero.
Well, you insisted I be in there.
Yes,
and I
as the narrator.
If I felt if I'm going to be there, you're going to join me.
Every hero needs a sidekick. So I was like, okay, I'll represent the reader. You're the professor. So you're teaching me, you're educating me. And I'm learning in terms of how we should present it as a comic. So it's this very meta experience, which hopefully makes it more than just, not there's anything wrong with reading a history piece. My God, like Harvey has given me, like, I'm kind of sitting here for free with a professor and a historian getting like a whole, very detailed explanation of our history, right? So it's very cool for me in that regard. But like we wanted to make it accessible. We wanted to show people like the learning process and the teaching process at the same time to hopefully make it more than just, hey, here's an article about history. And so that is sort of the context. And we landed on the Bill of Rights because we thought we could do it in a succinct number of pages.
Yeah, I'll just point out on that we had first talked about actually going. Didn't we first talk about possibly just going straight into a graphic novel?
Maybe which we want to do,
or turning Thomas Paine and the Promise of America.
That's a great idea.
Into that kind of graphic novel, which by the way was great. But I kept thinking, boy, this could take a long time. And then it was Matt. You actually heard me say some additional things about the Economic Bill of Rights, and you said, well, let's just do that, and we can do it in a more compact, right? You said, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, we said
more compact, activity.
Figure out if we even like each other enough to work together. See if this works. See if we can make this fun and also, rewarding in every way. And it was like Harvey and I talk about this a lot because it's so surprising. It was instantly super fun and like and very cool at the same time. Like we knew that we were like, this is what we should be doing right now, making this kind of work. And we're just having the best time working together. Like it was never stressful. Was it? I mean, it was work.
No, the only thing, I'll tell you the most stressful thing was at the moments where I was about to tell you that we made a mistake, we should go back and do something more. The stress on my part was that you were going to say, fuck you.
I've said that.
Well,
I should have actually asked permission. I forget. I've been on the show a number of times. Is that
no, it's okay. No, but I'm very I'm glad that wasn't the reaction there. Well, I mean, so in the next few minutes here, I think people should definitely go and read the comic. It's a very interesting way of putting this forward. I want to talk a little bit about where we're seeing this fit in to the current kind of political moment, right? Because it's been a while since we've had you on, Harvey, and I think that one thing that is getting a little bit difficult, and just putting some cards on the table, is that like we went through, I think, a very optimistic political moment on the left, which was like those Bernie campaigns.
Yeah,
I think right now it feels fairly pessimistic for a lot of people. A lot of people. I mean, hell, even with our good friends Nick and Neil last week, they were using terms like, what should we be doing in a period of decline, right? Like, how should we be preparing ourselves for this? So, I'm sort of curious, your perspectives as somebody who's been writing about this and thinking about this for a long time. where you're seeing activity around this, because it seems like sometimes I, even on this program, have been having a hard time talking about platforms that I might like to see enacted, because it sort of seems far-fetched.
That's a great question, and I really actually appreciate it, because I've been thinking exactly along those lines. And I'm not telling you that I'm optimistic about what I'm ever proposing, but here's something to consider. So I'm not concerned about the American people. I'm not concerned about American working people finding this argument for an economic bill of rights an alien idea. That I mean, the history speaks to that fact. The polling basically confirms what I've been saying for years. I and others, by the way, not just me alone, but it confirms it. And I will confess that in Biden's withdrawal from the campaign and the enthusiasm surrounding this ticket, it doesn't make me like say, oh my God, so many possibilities are in order. No, not at all. But what it does tell me is that, can we get by November to make the possibilities reemerge? And I am more hopeful now than I was 3 months ago. Okay. Now, my biggest concern is this, that these people who this campaign, whatever enthusiasm it may be generating, however much they're getting the right media attention in certain kinds of quarters, the fact is that they still don't get it. And by the way, and that's where we start the comic. They just don't get it. And I have a feeling that we probably did that. Well, we did all of that before Biden withdrew. But the fact is that it still remains. The Democrats just don't get it. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, let's take the precise problem of Project 2025, which on any given day, Trump and Vance embrace, and on any given day, they say, we didn't come up with it. It's not ours. The point is, we know it's theirs. We know if the Republicans win, and they're not even Republicans, if the reactionaries win, then we know what's in store. Okay. And by the way, another indicator of that, if I can sidebar this, is down in the state of Texas, as you know, a federal district court ruled that the National Labor Relations Board is unconstitutional. And next it'll go up to the Fifth Circuit. And for all I know, the Fifth Circuit will handle it in a similar fashion. And if it gets to the Supreme Court, who the hell knows? Okay. But nevertheless, right now. So what are the Democrats doing to answer Project 2025? They're pointing fingers at Trump and Vance. They're pointing fingers at the Republicans. They're running, in one sense, they're trying to run what they call a joyful campaign, or a campaign of, freedom and hope and all that. And on the other hand, their primary arguments all too often come down to, look at what the hell they're going to do.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Negative. Well, I haven't found yet in this campaign, since she was securing the nomination and won the nomination, any kind of real vision. The closest vision is where certain people speak and things slip out of their mouth that was not a part of their talk beforehand. So, for example, especially what Walz on the night of the convention said, I believe referred to healthcare and housing as rights. And Bernie in his speech, he talked about what we're going to do after we win this upcoming election. Now, what we're going to do out of Bernie's mouth may sound great, but it wasn't like anybody else was listening all that clearly. Then when she went out on their campaign trail, along the way, she actually referred to healthcare as a right. We also know that she supported Medicare for all back in 2020 and then backed off. So who knows, right? The point is, there are these ideas that are seeping into the rhetoric. Now, if they did get it, I feel like I'm really sort of arguing this, but it is the case. This pisses me off half the time. If they really did get it, what would they be doing? They'd be proposing maybe a more abbreviated version. I don't really care as long as they get to the point. They'd be proposing an economic bill of rights. I mean, they would have been doing this for years now. And even now they might well have proposed something. If they didn't use the term, they might at least have referred to FDR and talked about what FDR might well have wanted them to do. I mean, there's so many things. So I'm sorry. So my point is that they just don't get it. However, things are happening. in the labor movement. And really, it may come down to this question. Can we get to the likes of Sean Fain or the Teamsters president and others to get them to start to speak of it? I don't deny organizing is essential. Grow the labor movement. That's fundamental. But let working people who are not in unions or not on the verge of securing a union know that the labor movement has something broader to offer, and let them basically tell the Democrats, this is what we want. This is what I had hoped the likes of AOC and Bernie would have tried to do that before they threw their endorsements to Biden to begin with.
Mhm.
But that's where the possibilities, I think, present
And
themselves.
I mean, I will say that, like, at least on the person of Sean Fain, I think he actually has done a very good job of actually tying what he's doing with the UAW to the struggle for everyday folks, people outside of the labor movement.
And
Go
it's
ahead,
in the terminology too, like with Sean Fain saying working class, right on the
Yes.
DNC speech where it says middle class behind him, and now Kamala Harris is saying the opportunity economy, which to me, and when or Heather Long, in
Which,
the
I'm
Washington
sorry,
Post
who
says
does that appeal to? I really, the only person
Capitalists.
that does appeal to everybody,
and small
man.
business people. Like I mean, that's that when I hear like middle class capitalism, that's what Heather Long in the Washington Post is calling it. Where apparently it's like we're gonna build a lot and then like expand the child tax credit. But like to me, it's like this is so you want to obscure that it's not about how much labor is bringing in.
Mhm.
You want there to be other avenues that people are getting income from that maybe you accentuate, like starting a small business, for instance.
Yeah, but
And that sort of
I'm
thing.
with you. Funny you brought up the middle class term and the term middle class. Back in the 1950s is when the term middle class became popular to refer to working people.
Mhm.
But when people were asked in the 1950s to describe themselves, they were given the categories, they'd call themselves working class. They didn't call themselves middle class. Okay. And it remains the case that, especially since we know the Republicans and the Democrats together in the course of the last 50 years have devastated the middle class. Okay. Then talk about what you've got. You've got the working class. Okay. And the imperative of empowering the working class. And that's, it should be that way. And by the way, so the comic in many ways, as you probably saw, reminds people that in 1944 into 45,
Mhm.
labor picked up the idea of the Economic Bill of Rights and ran with it, one, and then closes on the important fact that the only way these kinds of things can transpire, can be placed on the agenda, is if labor starts to do it. And this is the argument I've been making to my friends who happen to be labor leaders. And, they give me a nod, but I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah. I think that's the history here. I think is worthwhile too, because as somebody who's like certainly not taking the deep dives you have, but have looked at what it was like for working people, particularly in the South in like the 20s and 30s, and to imagine what was going to be achieved in the next 15 years might have sounded a little bit like ludicrous to folks, right? I mean, is that fair enough? To sort of remind people too, is that like things can move kind of rapidly. The kind of pre-FDR moment. I mean,
Yeah.
how bleak would the conversations have sounded at that point for a lot of folks?
Oh God, yeah. Let's put it this way: while it is the case, I believe that FDR picked up on elements of labor's rhetoric, labor's discourse, to create the idea of an economic declaration of rights, which he called for in 32 in his campaign, and then the Economic Bill of Rights. And why do I say that? The labor movement from the late 19th century into the early 20th century talked about the need for an American, not the need, but there should be an American standard of living. The understanding was that working people should enjoy an American standard of living. Now, what did that mean? It meant a good society. It meant the kinds of things that would go into an Economic Bill of Rights. And I know that influenced FDR. I know that. But I think if you ever told people that kind of stuff, okay, without actually pointing a finger at who the culprits were, in the midst of the Depression. They would have imagined you were just fluff. And one thing FDR did do is he knew, like Bernie, he knew how to point a finger at what were then the millionaires of the Gilded Age. I mean, hell, he sought legislation to cap the incomes of the rich. He said one of America's problem, both economically and in terms of democracy, was that we've allowed the wealthy to concentrate too much wealth and power in their hands. He was blunt about it, absolutely blunt about it. And
economic royalists was the term.
There you go.
I
And
would just
that's right.
say
That's
to anybody who thought Biden was doing an FDR impression, Biden didn't have any economic royalists coinage during
Right.
his administration.
Yeah, right. In fact, to go back a bit to Obama, because I think somebody, I mentioned it or somebody mentioned it before. Barry, before we came on, you mentioned Barry. Barack Obama, in his inaugural address, the first one, that would have been January 2009, I believe. Yes, right? 2009. Yeah, in that speech, he talked about the fact that we're all at fault. We're all at fault. Well, that's bullshit in 2009. I mean, and by the way, he followed through when his, Treasury Department and Attorney General's office never went after the bankers and capitalists who screwed the American
But we're
people.
the ones standing between you and the pitchforks, right?
Right.
Yeah.
He went after him with some new money they magicked out of thin air and said, hey,
Yeah,
invest
right.
this in the economy for us.
Right. So, I mean, it would be great to hear some American politician talk about economic royalists, right? It'd be great.
I think it's desperately needed in a lot of ways, but also I think being able to fuel ourselves with aspirations and hopes is also really critical in a moment like this. Harvey and Matt, really great speaking with y'all. Could y'all tell us a little bit about what might be coming next, and be sure to tell us, Matt, how to keep up with the Letterhack.
Let me phrase this, Harvey.
Yes, please.
If you look at the comic we just made, we put the entire 1960s on one page. That should probably be like a chapter, right? It could be its own book. So just imagine how we could expand on what we've already done. Those are the ideas that we have cooking offline right now. And we're meeting to talk about what do we do next? Because it's not what do we do next as in we don't know. It's that we have a lot of options.
Well, can I reveal what we did sort of talk about?
That's up to you.
You sure?
We love a plug. We love.
I'm gonna draw it. So yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
I mean, there's no question.
So we're meeting next Monday, I believe, right? Is that our day? Right. Okay.
Yeah.
We're meeting next Monday, and we actually kind of met last week, but not hardcore. And we talked about the possibility of picking up on something sort of that I did with Cale Brooks on a Jacobin video. It was titled "What Makes a Great President." That's not the theme. Okay, that's not the theme. But within that one, I make it a point of saying that, well, first of all, great struggles from below make great presidents. But I said to Matt, there's a paragraph in Take Hold of Our History, which says there's these three moments where Americans saved what they considered to be the promise of America by going radical, despite themselves. They somehow found it in themselves, and inspired by their own leaders, and indeed inspired by the folks who were their presidents and leaders, okay, who they were lucky enough to have in the likes of Lincoln and FDR, that they went radical and they carried out what would be essentially revolutions in American public life. So, for example, in the 1770s, it was, Thomas Paine called for revolution. You can bet that, and I can guarantee, well, not guarantee, I can tell you, you'll have to trust me. The elites of the colonial era, not just the economic royalists, but literally the guys in the Continental Congress, they were looking for the kind of revolution that Paine was projecting. But somehow the likes of Washington found it in his aristocratic bearing to embrace the ideals of common sense, at least enough to lead a revolution. So Americans saved what Paine laid out as an American promise and that Jefferson inscribed in the Declaration as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness by creating the makings of a democratic republic. Okay. In the 1860s, Lincoln said to Americans, basically, the time has come. It's time for us to bring an end to slavery. Now, what empowered him to do that? The fact that the Civil War had begun, and what they discovered was thousands upon thousands of Southern slaves were making their way to the Union lines, trying to volunteer for the Northern forces, whether it was ditch digging or trying to get into uniform. And that empowered him then to literally authorize the Emancipation Proclamation. And FDR, however much he despised the economic royalists and wanted to bring an end to the Gilded Age, what really empowers him in the 1936 election to call for a second New Deal. Well, he's pursuing a second New Deal, not just the initial stuff, but to go on and try to carry out a full-scale, if you like, political revolution, is the fact that workers organized in the millions. So I said to Matt, if these Democrats, it's not to impress the Democrats, it's not to impress the administration. We've got to get people to see, okay, that if we're going to save democracy, the only way to do so, and we quote Henry Demers Lloyd on that very first page, we can save the rights we have inherited from our fathers only by winning new ones to bequeath our children. Americans got to go radical.
Yeah.
That's what it takes. It's historically blatant.
And I want to draw Harvey and I in like colonial cosplay really bad. Well, so like we're gonna do that. But
and I told him I want the Brooklyn Bee on the colonial side.
There you
go. Look, to answer your other question, folks can keep up with me at youtube.com/the Letterhack. I live stream every Monday and Wednesday night, and sometimes Friday, and sometimes Tuesday, which I'm from San Antonio.
Well, hell yeah. I really can't wait to keep up with the work. I do agree. We got to make America radical again. Matt and Harvey, always a pleasure.
Thanks.
And hope to talk to you soon.
It's good to see you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
All right, man. We got our big thing coming. We got a little education. Now it's time to do a little bit of unlearning. No, time to do some unlearning. We got some bad news coming out of the state of South Carolina. Are you ready for it, Matt?
Let's do it.
This is something that I will say infuriates me very, very much, which is that not only does the right wing sort of attack working people today, tries to keep people weak, tries to keep people misinformed, tries to derail solidarity. But that's not enough for them. The right-wing freaks are also coming for your kids. And nothing is more disgusting than the way that they sort of take advantage of the crises that they create, right? South Carolina, like many states in this country, is a state that has just seen massive suffering for children because of attacks on public education in the state of South Carolina. And what's pretty nasty is that there's a group here that is claiming that they're out here to help out these kids with their education, and that organization is PragerU. Which, Matt, could you give people who might not know what PragerU is just the general sense of what that organization is and how they operate?
So yeah, PragerU is Dennis Prager project, which is tax deductible, which is supposed to be educational, and the education is of course right-wing propaganda. And yeah, I was shocked that it is in the YouTube Kids vertical. And which means like you can't comment on it and say, hey, this is suspect educationally. It's just purely available for embedding onto kids, sort of like syllabuses, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's really is unbelievable. So just really quick, this is not the only state that has brought PragerU content into their school, but this is just another example of the way that they're trying to prey on this. And we're going to play some videos from PragerU just for people to understand what this kind of education is. Also, remember that South Carolina is a school system that is massively underfunded. Right, it is purposefully underfunded. It's a school system that regularly has difficulty in providing equal education, let's say, to different groups of people in the state of South Carolina. Don't need to give you too many hints there to know what I'm talking about. But this attempt by the state superintendent in South Carolina to bring in PragerU is just a really, really nasty example of how austerity creates opportunities for the right wing, right? This is a gift to the right. This is a gift to PragerU, right? Which is not a legitimate educational organization. Is not something, in my opinion, that should be anywhere near a student or a young person, and certainly not in a formal education setting. We can just look at this real quick. Teachers across South Carolina are sharing their thoughts after the state announced a new partnership with conservative nonprofit organization that allows their videos to be used inside of classrooms. State Superintendent Ellen Weaver announced a partnership with PragerU on Monday to allow its content to be an optional resource for teachers. However, some teachers are raising concerns about its content. Quote, PragerU is not an educational organization, they're a YouTube channel. I'm not here to tell students what to believe. I'm here to help them look at situations and information critically and then make up their own minds. The PragerU content doesn't do that. And we'll get into that in just a second.
This woman, what's her name? Ellen
Weaver.
Do you have any info on her? Because I got a little bit. She is the former president and CEO of the Palmetto Promise Institute, a conservative think tank in South Carolina, which supports public funding of private schools.
Oh. Well, yeah. I mean, no, this is somebody who loves public education so much, she's willing to sell it out.
Which is like an important point to underline. Like when they say, when Betsy DeVos, for instance, these charter school freaks, they are very clear that they still want the Uncle Sam to be funneling money to their organizations. Like this is not, pay if you can, and it's just people that can pay. No, this is still a taxpayer-funded enterprise. It just has no oversight, and the profiteers get to control it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's an important question, and also a note here that they make it very clear. If you watch this, and I was going to play it for everybody. It's really tell people where to go. You can watch this on PragerU's thing. Y'all can watch this. They make
there, and that's what that prepared in.
They make a big deal about all of this content not being required, right? So don't worry, Matt, it's not required. But the fact is that this is something that you should get into trouble with with your principal if it turns out that you're giving them PragerU videos in school, right? In any normal community. But in fact, South Carolina is rubber stamping this. Now, will there be instances of kind of right-wing ideologue teachers potentially wanting to use this? Sure. Will there also be examples of teachers who are overworked and underfunded, just saying, hey, why don't y'all watch the YouTube lesson instead of me having to lecture today? Yes. Which is fundamentally the problem. These are things that just should not be in schools in the first place.
There were days where I think it was even in high school, but definitely middle school, where they put on Reading Rainbow, not Reading Rainbow, Magic School Bus. And I loved those days as a child. But even then, I'm like, this is kind of shoddy. Yeah, this kind of seems like the teachers maybe hung over and wanted an easy day.
Well, Matt, that might be because you've been miseducated and you need to be properly educated by PragerU. I'm just going to tell people we're going to get through a couple of lessons here. We have a big one on the state of Israel, which I'm sure y'all know. PragerU has a very, very fair and balanced take on that community and colonial project there. But maybe just to get us started in this project, Matt, we're going to talk about Christopher Columbus. Christopher Columbus, was it Ben Shapiro who got in trouble for his Christopher Columbus video? Remember that was a few
Oh
years
yeah,
back?
because it published when he was out of office, but basically it's like he killed a bunch of cannibals.
Yeah.
I think it's might have been Crowder actually. Now that you say that,
Yeah. Anyway, Christopher Columbus is a kind of big fixation on the right wing. I was saying to Matt, like, there's a lot of focus and discourse about him, and I'm not going to stick my foot into all of it, but I will say the hyperfixation that the right wing has on Christopher Columbus, as if he is someone who is like integral to the fabric of America, is so ahistorical. But they are and it's impressive that you could maybe see them wanting to do some lies and misinformation about like Andrew Jackson, right? Because he was like an American president who like had an influence on our history. The extent that they go to whitewash Christopher Columbus's crimes and attitudes is really amazing. So, anyways, I won't front load this too much. This is what kids in South Carolina will have access to for learning about Christopher Columbus.
Exactly a paradise of civilization, and the native people were far from peaceful.
But you just said the Taino were peaceful.
They pretty much are. But there are other tribes who aren't. The Taino I had met had cuts and scars and bruises all over them. I asked why, and they told me about the Caribs, who are vicious, warring cannibals.
Cannibals? Like they
Eat people, see,
Whoa!
right? Hey, all the things that are bad in the world I come from, jealousy, lying, murder, war, it all exists in the land I just found too. But in Europe, we draw the line at things like eating people and human sacrifice. Some of the native folks from where I just left do those things regularly.
pause it just real quick. That's not actually even true. Europeans at that time were eating like mummified remains, especially the elites, as a way to live forever.
No, yeah, superstition
for it.
in Europe.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, this is a really kind of disgusting, thing that they use. Particularly, like you see them use this against like the Aztecs too, right? This is a kind of famous fixation of these apologists for mass slaughter. Is I don't know. Literally at this point, like reviving some of the nastiest fantasies of the native peoples to this part of the world as being uncivilized, extremely dangerous, maybe not even properly like the rest of us. I mean, this is like old school Euro racism.
And I know we're going to hear about Israel from our boy Dennis Prager, and maybe this is a little bit unfair to include, but Spain had a bit of a history with Jewish people. At that time.
That is actually.
And our boy Chris Columbus wrote to King Ferdinand and Queen Isabel of Spain, "Your Highness, as Catholic Christians and princes who love the holy Christian faith and the propagation of it, and who are enemies of the sect of Mahoma Islam, and all the idolatries and heresies, resolved to send me, Cristobal Colon, to the said parts of India to see the said princes, with a view that they might be converted to our holy faith. Thus, after having turned out all the Jews from your kingdoms and lordships, your highnesses gave orders for me that with a sufficient fleet I should go to the said parts of India. I shall forget sleep." I mean, is this context at all relevant? Like when we're talking about how he felt about any sort of people he might colonize. Also, that's how the Spanish felt about Jews, Dennis. So maybe try to confront that in this shit.
Yeah, well, he's about to do a force field against any criticism against him in a second, Matt.
Beautiful.
You will not expect, actually, you definitely will. You will not expect what it is that he's going to talk about next.
So, these people in your time who think it was a peaceful paradise are misinformed. Or lying.
Yeah, but what about slavery? You didn't deny that.
Deny? No. Slavery is as old as time and has taken place in every corner of the world, even amongst the people I just left. Being taken as a slave is better than being killed, no? I don't see the problem.
Well, in our time, we view slavery as being evil and terrible.
Yeah. Again, this is for children. Like, really, like, let's also be very clear and just like not forget this. This is content targeted at children.
Yeah.
So the lesson is slavery is better than being killed. Can you argue with that?
Yeah.
Can you argue with that with your master's degree, Matthew?
Yeah, you can. I mean, there's something called the Black Legend that all sort of English speakers at that time, when they had their eye, like Cromwell, when they had his eye on Jamaica,
Mm-hmm.
they are like, hey, there's a lot of riches over in these colonies. And also, those Spanish people are really treating those natives horribly. Like, there were critics of this even at the time. Now, were they actually even better once they got there and did the colonizing? No. No, they did a lot of the exact same things, so much that we don't even really remember that the Spanish were particularly remembered for being brutal in the colonies. But the idea that, no, this is just fine, everyone does it, is such a it's so chicken shit.
I mean, and this is the we'll play a bit of it. This is the next 2 minutes of the video is just Christopher Columbus saying, "You cannot judge me by any standard that you hold today," which is a great lesson again for kids to learn about Christopher Columbus. And that's the thing is about PragerU, right? Is if they just and we're because we have all these videos, we're cutting some, we're going to do more in the post game. If they just wanted to sort of do subtle tilts on these kind of things, to give a little skewed version of history to, maybe start people on the path of being a conservative down the line, they could maybe get away with it. But instead, at the end of every video for these kids, there will just be a 3-minute thing that's usually not really like directly connected or tangentially related for them to just make an argument about like why having any criticism of any figure from history is incorrect.
Yeah, and I gotta say, like, the choice of it's better than dying, right? Like, that kind of gives it away that there were some people who thought it might have been bad, which is the people who were subjugated by it that had to be compelled to under threat of murder. But
Yeah,
anyway.
they were like, no, that's literally what they were saying. It's like, hey, do you want to die? This is better than dying. Yeah.
No, I guess I made my. It's Kanye, yeah.
Magnifico, that's wonderful.
Wait.
I just left. Being taken as a slave is better than being killed, no? I don't see the problem.
Well, in our time, we view slavery as being evil and terrible.
Magnifico, that's wonderful. I am glad humanity has reached such a time. But you...
First of all, he would not say that.
No.
You have these people living together as equals? Wait, no, she should tell them about the Jews in America.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic.
The multi-faith society that we have.
Yeah, one thing he might say was
heresy.
And a trigger warning, folks, for this one. While I was in the boat, I captured a very beautiful Carib woman whom they said the Lord Admiral gave to me. When I had taken her to my cabin, she was naked, as was their custom. I was filled with a desire to take my pleasure with her and attempted to satisfy my desire. She was unwilling, and so treated me with her nails that I wished I had never begun. But to cut a long story short, which is funny that phrase was used back then.
Yeah.
But to cut a long story short, I then took a piece of rope and whipped her soundly, and she let forth such incredible screams that you would not have believed your ears. Eventually, we came to such terms, I assure you, that you would have thought that she had been brought up in a school for whores.
Holy shit. Yeah, so super cool. So again, I just want to
but also Magnifico. I'm glad
Magnifico. I'm glad that they're free now. We have other videos to get to, but I do just want to finish this moral universe that he's going to put forward here, because I think this is in a lot of ways the reason they're focused on history is to do whitewashing. But these are the kind of argument that you're about to hear is a very kind of typical cultish argument. And what makes it cultish is that it's immune from logic. It's something that if you learn this way of thinking about a subject, nothing that is ever said or argued against it can move you, because you are basically saying, I'm taking as a first principle that I cannot be moved by this kind of argument. But anyways, let's hear it.
You said you're from 500 years in the future? How can you come here to the 15th century and judge me by your standards from the 21st century? For those in the future to look back and do this is, well, estúpido.
Are you calling me dumb?
Certainly not. I can tell you're a very smart young lady, but the idea of throwing away the past because of your present values is... Listen, I love and am thankful for the ancient Greeks, but they did lots of things that here in 1493 I do not agree with. They
The gay
permitted
stuff?
lifestyles and worshiped gods that, as a Christian, I think is very bad. But that doesn't mean I shouldn't respect and honor all the incredible and amazing things they did.
So, good and bad is based on the time you live in?
That is a great question. I told you I knew you were smart. Some things are clearly bad,
Moral
no
relativity.
matter when they happen. But for other things,
Which apparently,
Was
like
slavery-
slavery and killing off native peoples,
So
is
slavery
not
not one of
included
those.
in that. What?
Yeah, slavery not included, but the gay stuff that the Greeks were doing.
I mean, this is. I mean, seriously, I'm not nitpicking. This is insane. All right, let's just let him finish his thought, and then we can move on to some of these other lessons that we need to learn.
before you judge, you must ask yourself, what did the culture and society of the time treat as no big deal? Not everyone can time travel as you do and see how normal becomes very not normal.
Sorry,
Something's
again,
off.
like most people didn't have an idea of that. Most people weren't thinking about the slave trade unless they were immediately implicated in the slave trade. And the full like awareness of how bloody it was something like a bit of a PR issue for centuries that like constantly were dealt with in law. Like this is one of the things that like the House of Burgesses, like these are the types of things like the conditions. Like, you know what, guys, shit. I forget what the Royal African Company in London. They're like, hey, you know what? We got some business to attend to. Too many of the people we're enslaving are jumping off the ships, so we need to figure out some way to do. Like that was business to them.
No, I think it is honestly a very important, like, moral and philosophical point. Is that, like, no, people thought this was bad. And particularly in the American context, you get this whole thing. It's like, oh, these brilliant minds and philosophers and framers of the United States Constitution, um, you know, they didn't really recognize that slavery was wrong. It's like, no, people recognized that it was wicked and evil. They had to try to convince themselves because every human like part of their body is saying this is wrong. That's why you have these bizarre phrases like the peculiar institution, right? Because people
Right.
knew there was something wrong with this fundamentally at the
And
time.
And they know this too because they'll bend over backwards saying, "Look at Thomas Jefferson actually knew it was bad."
Mhm.
And of course, Thomas Jefferson had enough time to just sit around in his slave plantation and philosophize. But ultimately, like it was too ingrained in the economy for him to do anything about it. But like, yeah, he knew it too. That's the power of capitalism and capital, that it can perpetuate massive injustice, even if people can get enlightened about it for brief moments, on the porch.
So we have some more lessons to get to. I think we're definitely going to do a big extra credit portion in the post game, patreon.com/left reckoning. But before we do that, Matt, there's one last lesson I need to share with you in the main show. So they do these things on PragerU. Again, this is going to be in schools for children in South Carolina, amongst other states, by the way. South Carolina is not alone in being one of these states that a company like PragerU is trying to take advantage of. They do these videos again for children that are supposed to be like PragerU looks around the world, and their stories from India, Sudan, the Netherlands, that are supposed to sort of teach us a little bit about the world. Ironically, though, a lot of these videos sort of seem to teach us that your conservative uncle is right about everything. This one, just to catch people up, because again, just like any good parable, all of the lessons become clear at the end. This is the story of a young girl in Colombia, poor girl, a poor but happy young woman who has grown up on her family's plantain farm in Colombia. And she looks out about what's going on in the rest of the world and comes to realize that her dream for a better future um, revolves around the United States successfully building the wall. But let's play this for y'all.
Abuelita down the hill on stretchers.
So just the quickest of updates for folks. She lives near the border, this young Colombian woman, and she meets some Venezuelan refugees who are also trying to cross the border. She knows how to get across the border because she lives near it. She helps them out, and their tale unfortunately ends in tremendous difficulty for this grandmother and her granddaughter.
And people like to mention Venezuela just to remind folks the one top primary reason, of course there are others, but why there are people fleeing Venezuela is because we destroyed their oil economy to the tune of a Great Depression worth. And that was their number one commodity. So not great for your politics when that happens. But anyway.
Cruz explains how much danger they were in. Sophia hangs her head. The more she listens to him talk about the problems near the border, the more she understands. Unsecured borders bring crime, violence, and suffering. Cruz tells her that strong borders are more humane. They make sure that people like Alejandra move to a new country legally without the risks. By letting countries control who comes in and out, strong borders protect communities and reduce the power that cartels have.
Just really quick, by the way, just like in living memory in the state of Texas, it has been the hard border. The harder the border gets, that is the most beneficial to the cartels.
100%. This is so obvious. Like
so
the relationship is like this with hardening of the border. Strength of cartels.
It's
a one-to-one relationship.
They
what was it?
home.
Just one thing. George H.W. Bush did a whole bunch of stuff in the Gulf of Mexico back when he was president, and they spent a whole bunch of millions and millions on boats and shit, and just started going through the land. And they didn't slow it down at all. All it did was this prohibition is capitalize the people that get around it for profit.
Sophia and Fernando apologize to their parents for breaking their trust. Pablo and Juanita are so grateful to have their...
So, by the way, just to catch people up, this sweet, caring young woman and her brother see that this family and people are struggling on their journey to the United States through Colombia, and they decide, since they know the path, that they will help them across this. So this is the weepy eye,
children back safely, that they throw a fiesta that night. Everyone is enjoying rice, arepas, and of course, cooked plantains. For a while, Alejandra and Abuelita stay with Sofia's family. Cruz offers to help them request asylum from the Colombian government. Unfortunately, the legal immigration process moves slowly. One morning, Sofia wakes up and finds that Alejandra and...
Sorry, do we want to expedite that? Do we want to invest?
I know, it's honestly insane that got through.
In that process?
I guess it's a kind of dig at Colombia, Right,
it's at their bureaucracy, but
but ours would be really good.
Let's get Abuelita in.
Abuelita are gone. With the unsecured border so close and migrant groups passing often, they...
I love even the art of this. If you're listening to this, I'm sorry, but even the art of this scene it's just the unsecured border is just moths to a flame. You know what I mean? It's just it's so mysterious what could be on the other side.
Simply could not wait. Another harvest is coming up, but this time Sophia and Fernando are focused on school. Sophia hopes Colombia can finally secure its border. When it does, and when the United States secures its border again, the dangerous migrant route will no longer be an option or a magnet for danger and suffering. As Cruz points out, strong borders bring safety, rule of law, and cooperation
would say
between
that.
countries. Things everyone needs for a better life.
I mean, really, honestly, like kind of evil and insane. Because the fact of the matter is that, like, as for example, the American border has become more and more militarized and dangerous. It has not slowed, the migrants. Rather, it has meant that we're seeing horrifying videos of people trying to sneak in 18 wheelers and cooking alive in the valley. I mean, really, really, really brutal stuff. Because what causes migration, do- it's this is an explanation for children. But like this is something that is written by adults. The argument here from the Psychopaths of PragerU is that migrants are just kind of like looking around and like, oh, is this secured? Is this door locked? Or is that door locked? Oh, I guess if it's unlocked, then we're gonna keep going and keep going. Instead of my family has been killed by gang violence, oftentimes in countries where the United States has sponsored those kind of organizations to stop left-wing governments from coming into power or maintaining power,
Or exported them like
or
MS-13.
yeah, or all of the wealth in my society has been extracted and has gone to El Norte. So we are following where the money is that has been taken from the land that we come from, right? No, none of those conditions are what creates migration. What creates migration is not having a tall enough fence and not having enough border guards, which everybody knows, every single person knows is true, is not how it works. And we could get bogged down in responding to these videos, but I think
Yeah.
the fundamental issue is this: that's not something that kids should be engaging with. Not just like that is not something that children should be engaging with because it's presenting to them an extremely warped view of the world. That's not educating them about Colombia, right? There's nothing. All I know about Colombia is that plantain farmers dream of a day when the United States has a very tall wall on the Arizona-Mexico border.
It's a downgrade from the propaganda that I was fed as a kid, which is like Ronald Reagan.
Yeah. Well,
Say, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. How dare you not let the people get to where they want to be, you oppressor. It's wild how we've just done a complete 180 on that shit. It's pretty fucking depressing.
Well, we're not done, obviously, after what we just heard from Matt with your re-education program. So we're going to have to dive deep into that in the post-game. Patreon.com/leftreckoning to get access to that. Come and join the other side of the show. We always have a lot of fun over there, and I hope you will come hang out with us.
Absolutely, folks. See you in a little bit.